Hello! If you're watching this on October 18th, 2018, it means that this is the 3-year anniversary of the day that my father passed away. I kind of just wanted to sit down and talk, without any plan, really, because it just makes me feel good to share his story or share even really sad stories, honestly. I doubt that it'll be a happy video, so I totally understand if at some point you're like, yo, I can't with this is making my whole day gray, and you just click off. I get that. I'll probably still laugh because I'm inappropriate, but other than that, I have a whole bunch of stuff around me, from photographs and sheet music to his magic wand and a notebook, so I just wanted to share that with you today. Yay. My father's name was Rodolfo Guzman, and he was a composer, a musician, a teacher, a father, a husband, a theologist, a thinker, and a loving man. He loved a lot of things. I don't think he loved himself. My dad was born in Cuba, and then moved to Puerto Rico for a while, and then moved back to Cuba, and then eventually moved to the United States to pursue a degree in music. And that's when he met my mom. They fell in love, they made a lot of beautiful music together, they moved to Virginia, and then they had me. They only moved back to Miami because they wanted to raise me with the family. I can remember sometime between 5 and 6 years old, my dad telling me that one day he wasn't going to be here anymore. He was diagnosed with diabetes in his early 20s, I think. And knowing what I know about diabetes now, I know that there's so many different ways to live with it and still be happy and healthy. And I even know people who are working to cure their diabetes because you can actually reverse it, it's been found out. But I don't think my dad knew that. And unfortunately, he let the illness crumble him. If my dad stayed on this earth for years and years and years after his diagnosis, it was because he stayed here for me, and he stayed here for my mom. I have a lot of memories of my dad experiencing the pain of his illness, both physically, emotionally, and mentally, to all extremes. And the way that he and I used to deal with it was by laughing and making very inappropriate jokes and developing a dark sense of humor that only he and I could really understand. It's hard to say anything, especially to the camera. I'm finding that it's hard for me to remember certain stories that I want to tell you about. And I think it's because most of my memories when it comes to my father are actually very, very centered around his illness. And that's probably because his illness was such a huge part of his identity that it almost consumed him in many ways. I guess I could tell you things about him that aren't that. It's probably going to be really hard to find a story that doesn't somehow involve his illness in some way, because that's what I knew him as. A loving father who also only really talked about his illness 90% of the day. My dad didn't talk a lot about his childhood with me. I don't think that his childhood was anything bad. I doubt that. I think that he had a beautiful time in Cuba and in Puerto Rico when he was a kid. His father was a photographer, and so it says Guzman Photo on the back of all of the photographs that we have, and all of the photos that you're seeing are from the 50s and 60s. Like, this one of him sitting with his drum set is from 1966. I like looking at these photographs because all I see when I look at these photographs are a kid that had everything at his fingertips, a kid that felt like a kid, and someone who just probably felt like anything was possible. But I know that must not have been the entire picture, because if there's one thing that my father had, besides love for me and my mom, it was very low self-esteem. My dad didn't think anything of himself. It showed a lot in the way that he took care of himself, and it showed a lot in the way that he would respond to certain situations. For example, I have memories when I was very little, like a toddler, buying cookies for myself and keeping them in the kitchen. And then I would wake up one night to go to get some cookies, and I would see that my dad had eaten them all. He'd be in the kitchen and he'd just be eating all the packs of my cookies. And every time that happened, because it happened so many times, whether it was cookies or pudding or jello or anything sweet at all, I'd say, "Daddy, what are you doing? Those are mine. Why are you doing this?" And I'd get so mad. And he would say, "Because I'm stupid. I'm stupid, Gab. I'm just stupid. Because I'm just dumb." And I always hated that answer. I didn't understand why he was giving me that answer. It wasn't an answer. But over time, I've come to realize that I think that my dad was dealing with a lot more emotional issues that he may have never gotten through than I realized. My dad really loved my sense of humor, which he influenced heavily. And he loved when we could laugh about his illness or whenever something tragic would happen.
That's all you're gonna do? Okay, that works. I'm just laughing at you.
A lot of times he would fall because he couldn't walk very well, because he would lose feeling in his feet. And instead of getting really worried or being embarrassed whenever he'd fall in public, I would just kind of laugh at him when he was on the ground and be like, "Bro, you look like a ladybug. Come on, you look stupid." I don't remember the jokes, but just joking that he looked like a bug turned upside down because he couldn't get up. And in other times, he would have these terrible nerve pains that would just kind of like seize through his entire body and make him make the horrible, worst noises. And instead of me getting worried again, if we were watching a show, I would just look at him and be like, "Shut up! I'm trying to watch something!" He would laugh. You know, that might seem insensitive to some people, but he would laugh. I remember another time when he had fallen on the living room floor, and I was watching something on my laptop, and then I couldn't get him up. I couldn't get him up, and my mom couldn't get him up. I think we got our neighbor to get him up. But he kept on apologizing for falling and like feeling really bad, and he was on the brink of tears. I didn't leave him. I sat with him, but I didn't pick him up either. So we sat watching the TV show. I think it was Gilmore Girls. We sat watching the TV show, but he was just on the floor. If there's one thing I know, it's that my father would rather have me laugh than have me worry. I thought I would have so much more to say about my dad, but I don't know if I've talked extensively about him to anyone besides my boyfriend, and so talking now seems kind of difficult, even though it does still feel good. I have his magic wand. My dad was a Christian who loved God and loved to study God and had so many books on different religions. They had so many books that they overflowed from his bedroom to the kitchen to the living room to the studio. It always drove my mom crazy. It always drove me crazy. There were so many books. He loved to study Christianity and how people thought about God and what God meant. He also loved to study religions that weren't Christianity, like Buddhism and Taoism, and I think there was a little bit of Hinduism in there too. But I also remember one day when he told me he was going to start practicing Wicca. He found Wicca and decided that he really liked it. And what he liked about Wicca was the fact that it didn't ask him to stop being a Christian. It didn't ask him to stop believing in his God. It was just a different way of seeing the world. And so my dad had a lot of incense and stones and little pyramids and rocks. And one day I walked in on him in his bedroom, and he was wearing a little cape. And he had this little wand. And he was doing a little Wiccan blessing. And when he saw me, he went, "Hey, Gab, do you want to salute the earth with me?" And I was like, I'm good, thanks. It's cool." The funny thing is that now I actually bought a whole bunch of books on Wicca because I would like to start studying it myself. It just helps me feel closer to him. I really liked that about him. I liked that he would be so open-minded when it came to different religions. It taught me to be the same way. Oh my god, I have so much of his music. I actually have a violin sonata here. And I loved hearing my dad composing music downstairs. All my life, I've heard my parents rehearsing for concerts and singing and playing their instruments. My mom plays the harpsichord and my dad played the recorder, the piano, the drums, the guitar. And I really liked watching him scribble notes on paper and practice his music. I was on the cover of the only CD that he released, along with my mom. One day, when I get rich, because I plan on becoming rich and famous, I want to re-record the music from that CD. And I want to record the music that I have on these music sheets with a really big, beautiful orchestra. Because even though I've heard so much of the music in my memory, I don't know what any of this music on this sheet is. I don't know how to read it, and I would love to hear it. And he has so much music that I know that he never actually published. So I'd like to do that. He was very pretentious when it came to music. I remember one time he was driving me to my middle school. And while we were driving, we stopped at a red light, and there was this young guy in his 20s in the next car over. And he was blasting rap music through all 4 of his windows with the windows down, and it was really, really loud. His car was shaking because the bass was so loud. My dad at the time happened to not like rap music. He only liked classical music and like old school rock. I was only allowed to listen to the Beatles and classical music when I was a kid. And he hated that guy had his music so loud. So what my dad did was he put on some Mozart and he rolled down all the windows of the car and he started blasting Mozart next to the guy's car. And me being in middle school, of course I was embarrassed. I was like, Daddy, what are you doing? But looking back at that story, that's so freaking cool. That's something that I would probably do. One time my dad shaved parts of his beard because I don't think I've ever seen his face without facial hair. And I just was like, I wonder what you would look like without facial hair. And so one day he shaved it. And this was back when I was in college. But the thing was, he didn't shave it right. And he didn't shave at all. He shaved like patches of his mustache and then patches of his beard. And so it looked really stupid. He was just like, I did this for you. And I said, that's great. Why does it look that way? And he just never actually finished the job. Oh, Patches, are you coming to me right now? Hello, how are you? Hey. Hello. Bye-bye. I have something here that I made when my dad went to the hospital. And it's not happy, but maybe I should share it anyway. Just to give you more of a backstory on his health, my dad had been battling diabetes for over 30 years, and he was on dialysis for the last 4 years, and then in the hospital for the last 10 months. One day after Christmas in 2014, he had an aneurysm, and he just never came home. He just went to the hospital. I remember that in the days leading up to the aneurysm, he was falling a lot more, and he was just really heavy. We couldn't pick him up. And there were some funny moments with that too. Like, I remember that one time he kept falling, and it was so stupid because like we couldn't keep waking up the neighbors to help pick him up. Like we couldn't do that. And so because we lived in a 2-story townhouse, one night when he fell, I coached him back up the stairs like a little dog. He was crawling up the stairs, and I was just like, come on, everything's gonna be fine. Come on, Daddy, let's go. And it was probably like a lot more disconnected and humorous and also patronizing than that. But I remember that it made him laugh, and he would also respond with like, oh, shut up. And he would go up like one stair every 5 minutes. Go.
Look,
I'm taking a video of you. Do things and stuff.
slip me a cookie,
Uh-huh.
and I'll slip you a ham.
I don't want your ham.
Slip me a cookie, and I'll slip you all the way to Vietnam. Slip me a ham, and I'll slip you a cheese.
None of this sounds appetizing. The only part that sounds appetizing is the cookie part.
Slip me a ham. What? Huh? What the hell? Let's see it.
When we got him to the hospital, when I had to leave for school again after Christmas break, I made him this book because I think the doctor said that he was going to start losing his memory, or that this was the beginning of a process. So I made him this book, and it's called Daddy's Book of Need to Know Stuff. And so it says stuff about you, stuff about mom, stuff about me. There was a page on why you're in the hospital, how to get better. There was contact information for people he could call in case he got scared. And then places we would go when he got to California. There's the stuff about him page. It said, your name is Rodolfo Guzman, and you were born on March 8th, 1956. You have a wife named Iris, who you've been married to for over 30 years, and a daughter named Gabriella, who's 22 years old. You love composing classical music and reading about different religions, and you used to be a music teacher, but you were retired a few years ago and went on disability. Your parents died many years ago, but don't worry. You went to both of their funerals and you loved them very much. Your wife and daughter love you so much, and they want nothing more than for you to get better so you can be with them. You have 3 cats here in Miami. One is chubby and cranky, and her name is Emily, who you named after Emily Dickinson. She loves you the most and always comes to say hi. You have another cat named Pumpkin, who's a sleek black cat that you call the Mystic, and she's very sweet and very cuddly. Your 3rd cat, Annie, is the youngest of the 3, and she's a little ginger cat that's extremely friendly and loves to be with you but hates being held. You like her because she reminds you of your daughter. And then I have these stupid drawings that are really bad. I had stuff about mom, and for the stuff about mom page, I just tried to remind him that if mom doesn't come to visit him one day, it's not because she doesn't love him, it's not because he's been abandoned, it's just because she's really tired and is probably at home sleeping. And then I said stuff about me. I told him that I was in college, that I would be there every day if I could be, if I was in Miami with him. And I told him that I was doing an internship teaching art to adults with disabilities, and that I had a YouTube channel, and that I had a weird relationship with Daddy, and that we make fun of each other all the time, but it's all out of love. And then I had a page for why he was in the hospital. Because maybe I didn't make this book for him before I left. I think that the whole reason why I made this book was because over time my mom told me that he was losing his memory and panicking a lot when he was in the hospital, that he kept waking up and feeling really scared and screaming, saying, that we had abandoned him and that he didn't understand why he couldn't go home, and he just felt really bad. And so on this page, I tried to explain why he was in the hospital so that if my mom wasn't there, he could look at the book. And he said, on December 26, 2014, you had an aneurysm. There was bleeding in your brain, and you've been bouncing back and forth between rehab and the ICU ever since. What happens is that one day you're doing better, so they transfer you to rehab to get physical therapy in the hopes of you coming back. But then something bad happens, like your heart stops beating for a while, or your sugar gets too low, so they send you back to the hospital. You also have short-term memory loss, which is why I made you this book. You're not in the hospital because we abandoned you. You're here because we need you to get better. And I want you at my graduation. And so, then I have this really stupid page called How to Get Better. And I knew that it wouldn't, but it's just little shit. It's just little things. It just says, even though you're bedridden, you have to make sure you're moving your limbs to keep up your strength. Every hour, raise your arms above your head 10 times. Try to lift your legs off the mattress at least an inch twice a day. Eat your veggies, drink your juice, and make sure to tell your nurse when you feel any discomfort. You need to stay on top of your sugar and your heart rate. Don't give up and keep reading. And so then I have phone numbers, and I kept trying to call him, but because he kept moving back from the ICU to rehab and kept changing rooms, I could never really get in contact with him that much because it was always really hard to find him. And so then I have this page where it says, when you get to California, we'll do a whole bunch of stuff. We'll have a gourmet hot dog at Doghouse. We'll watch scary movies. You'll meet my cats. You'll see my apartment. I'll take you to the LA County Museum of Art. We'll pick apples. We'll drive up to the Hollywood sign. I'll take you to an ice cream place called Cold Stone. I'll take you to Art Center. You'll meet all of my friends. We'll go for walks. We'll go to Vroman's, which is a bookstore I know you'll love. And we'll go to my favorite hiking place, Eaton Canyon. And I always knew that, like, we probably couldn't go to my favorite hiking place, Eaton Canyon, because if we could, he'd be in a wheelchair. But for some reason, I kept thinking, like, in my head, no, I could probably push a wheelchair through a hiking trail. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. And then on the end, it just says, "We love you, Daddy." I don't know if that book helped as much as I would have liked it to help. I think that at some point with his memory, he probably just forgot to open the book. Because my mom was the one that saw him a lot more towards the end, I think it was easier for him to remember my mom than to remember that book, but it did okay for a while. In this little book, he had everything, from little phone numbers to scribblings, and I think this book is interesting because you can kind of see days when he would be mentally all there and his handwriting would be a little bit more legible. And then there were days when you can tell that he wasn't all there and his handwriting is nothing. A lot of the times he would write things that he was asking God, and sometimes you could see that there were conversations between him and my mom, because my mom would write back to him. Yeah, I think towards the end, all he could really remember clearly was his faith. And I don't think that's uncommon. Our daughter was nominated for the Student Leadership Award. She will write an essay, 300 words, about how the things she's learned have affected her at Art Center. Thanks, Mom. He was probably like, that's cool, that's cool. I can't remember shit. I don't know what this says, but I see my name. It says, "And for Gabriella." So, I'm glad to see my name in there. I keep this with me, even though I can't read what it says. I just like to have his handwriting. His glasses I've kept too, and they are just as dirty and broken and a mess as they were when he had them. He didn't take care of himself. He didn't take care of his glasses. He didn't take care of anything that was his. But yeah. I would like to keep doing these kinds of videos over time, slowly, because I realize that there's so much more to say about my dad and the effect that he had on everybody. More to say than I can currently contemplate. My dad inspired a lot of students to pursue careers in music because he was such a good music teacher. And he pushed me to be a perfectionist and hard-headed and persistent. I think that there's a lot that I probably took from having to always be the one to make him laugh and not really cry in front of him or my mom, and there were a lot of really scary memories. A lot more than I'm sharing. But they were also really happy ones. It's just... I miss my dad. And I know that there's a really clear line between my childhood and my adulthood, because he passed away a month before I turned 23 and 2 months before I graduated from college. So there's a line, and that line is just the threshold from childhood and adulthood. And so there's life with daddy, and then there's life without daddy. You can also probably notice that when I was in college, I uploaded on YouTube a lot more. And then after college, that's when all of the inconsistencies started happening, and that's because 2018 is the first year that I've actually been able to come out of the financial, emotional, mental, and just circumstantial hole that his death left me and my mom in. There's so much more I want to share, but I'd like to do it when I'm prepared. If anybody watching this knows my dad, whether you're a student or a family member or a friend, feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube video. Like, if you could leave a YouTube comment, that would be great, so other people can see it. About my dad and how he affected you if you want. That would be cool. And if nobody on my YouTube page knows my dad, have you ever lost a parent or lost somebody that affected you really much? I should find more to say. And I will. But now I know that it's harder than I think. I love you, Daddy. And I love anybody who's listening. And I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna think about him for a while and visit places that make me feel close to him. I'm gonna go to my favorite tree and just think for a while. So, thank you for watching this video if you've made it this far. I'll see you in a much happier video next time. Okay, bye!